and we're looking forward to what you have to say.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Apostolik. This is Jeff Ferguson. We're from Sundt Construction. Two mental notes I made to myself during the last presentation. The first one is lay off the coffee a lot earlier. And the second one is don't follow Dr. Ballard, because he said so many good things in his presentation that my mind is racing past all these things I want to talk about, and I'm probably going to get distracted from what I had planned to talk about. Try not to do that. Just a general background on Sundt Construction. We were established in 1890. Since 1929, our headquarters has been in Arizona. We are a 100% employee-owned company, which in this industry is a little bit interesting in that for an employee-owned company, Sundt is owned by everybody from the CEO down to our entry-level craft workers. It's not a voluntary participation. If you work for Sundt, you're an owner. The largest single shareholder in Sundt owns less than 2% of the stock. What that means is when we're looking at things like change and implementing lean construction, it affects everybody, and it affects everybody in a very real way. We're all shareholders. What we do for a business is something that's evaluated throughout the breadth of the whole company. We do about $850 million in annual revenue, so we're not a small company. Instituting change in a company like Sundt is something that grows slowly. We do a lot of self-perform work. We self-perform underground and utility work. We self-perform process mechanical work, and we also self-perform concrete. Within the infrastructure environment, the group that Jeff and I work for, we build water and wastewater treatment plants, but we also have a operating division within our organization that does heavy highway construction. Our business is changing, and it's not just the company, but it's the marketplace in which we're working. If you can look at what we're showing here on the graph in the last 3 years, the Arizona Building District, which is the operating division within Sundt that we work for, our volume has grown from $150 million a year to almost $450 million a year. That 3 times growth in any organization is not one that's without pain. Managing that kind of change is something that's critical to being successful. Along with that change, the culture of the company is changing. Sundt's been around for over 100 years. I've worked with more gray-haired superintendents and managers in Sundt than I've seen in any other company I've worked for in this industry, and that's only been 3 in the last 15 years. There's a lot of culture and story within Sundt. They've done some huge landmark projects, Launchpad 39A at Cape Canaveral, the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. We've been around the world. It's a company that's not without history. Instituting change in that kind of an organization can be difficult, but it's not impossible. One of the things that we're trying to do at Sundt is evolve project leaders, not project observers. It's about being proactive in managing, not about sitting back and recording what happened and then pointing blame. I don't know what, had a little struggle here with our presentation. In 2006, FMI, a construction industry consulting group, produced a survey that talked about some of the things that cause the greatest amount of pain in a construction project. The top 4 were general construction experience, weak financial and business acumen, lack of effective communication, and lack of proactive planning. The 2 that we're going to spend the most time talking about today are the 2 with the biggest impact: the lack of proactive planning and the lack of effective communication. Sundt's vision to inspire people to go beyond the expected, and our objective to design and build projects with higher quality, better value, and a faster delivery through integrated collaborative teams. So why did Sundt get interested in lean? The simple definition of lean is to provide maximum value to your customer while eliminating waste. This is done through proactive planning, effective communication, and a process that's systematic, which means that it can be taught. Some of the key initiatives that have been implemented at Sundt in the last year is the implementation of the last planner system, building information management, or BIM, the integration of 3D and 4D modeling into our projects, as well as improvements in our QA/QC program to eliminate waste and improve quality. What's the impact of this been on with Sundt? We did a test project in 2005. It's called Apollo River Point. It's a $100 million office building for the University of Phoenix that was built in Phoenix, Arizona. That is the first project that we implemented Lean on. It was a test case. It was our opportunity to evaluate whether or not this would have an impact on our business. What we decided, after having looked at this in retrospect, is that it had a huge impact on our ability to manage that job. As a result of that experience, we made a corporate decision to culturally shift the company so that we are going to be implementing on every project that started after April 1st, 2006, the last planner system. The project that Jeff and I are on, it's a $105 million wastewater treatment plant that we're building in Phoenix. We were the first project after our test case to implement this system. We are working to create a collaborative culture of planning within our organization, to develop internal expertise. And the bottom line, and this is something that you had heard in the Caltrans presentation with Dr. Ballard, this is about change. This is not business as usual. There's no way that you can succeed in the marketplace that we're in right now in Phoenix, Arizona, without changing. Two hottest markets in the United States right now, Las Vegas and Phoenix. What are our expectations as we implement these initiatives? We want to create a culture where commitments are met. Anybody who's been in this business knows people fail to meet commitments and it disappoints the whole project team. You don't succeed. Predictable workflow. Without a doubt, this is probably the single most important thing that we can do to our industry to help improve it. And reliability, not just reliability of the workflow itself, but reliability of the individuals and the teams that we're working with. Specific expectations of lean construction. First and foremost is to become proactive managers and not reactive managers. The second is that this process would allow us to create participation through the use of peer pressure. And I can't emphasize this enough, but it works. The next expectation was to minimize waste, rework, and inefficiency. The bottom line, we expect to maximize value, to maximize both our opportunity to use the time that we have and the money that is the resource that a construction company operates on. Specific expectations we had of building information management, that it would create a culture where we can collaborate more intensely with owners, architects, and engineers so that we can truly bring the team together to solve problems before they impact a project. To identify system conflicts before they become issues, to reduce the potential delay or cost impacts that can be caused by RFIs. And anybody who's been in this business knows RFIs are the result of people looking at the work after it's started to be built. And then they find out there's a problem and they need an answer. Proactively planning your projects, you can eliminate this delay. The third impact or expectation of the building information management, the 3 and 4D model, is to foster early proactive participation from all the project participants. We faced a lot of obstacles. We sat down before we started this process, at least on our project anyway, and beyond that within the company, and we said, what are the big challenges that we're going to face going into this new process, and how are we going to manage that? One of the themes that we're going to hit on over and over during the hour that we're talking is that you have to have a plan about how you're going to plan. And going into a project with a new process without some expectation of what the difficulties are going to be and a plan to attack them, you're never going to be able to approach these things in a proactive fashion. One of the first things we identified was an internal perception of resistance from our subcontractors. The next one was a need for training. How are we going to communicate what we need to do to the people that we're going to be working with? Certainly resistance within Sundt. an organization as old and as successful as Sundt has been in the past is one in which change can be difficult. You've got a lot of people who very much feel we've been profitable and successful for the last 100 years. Why do we want to do something different? Why are we going to turn upside down the apple cart? Just general knowledge of the process. This is a significant obstacle whenever you start out on a new endeavor. If you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, you're never going to be able to succeed at it. Support from owners, architects, and engineers. One of the themes that we'll hit on during this is that you cannot be successful unless you have participation from everybody. Owners, architects, and engineers are integral in the process of building a project as large as the ones that we're doing. And the last, well, I think I got one more after this, is contractual changes that are going to be required. Anybody who's been in this business a long time knows that it's very difficult to accomplish anything unless you got teeth behind what you're doing. Contractually, my experience in the past has been if you ask somebody to do something and they don't have a good reason for doing it, the first thing they're going to do is go to their contract and say, it's not required, I don't have to participate. It's something that has to be addressed. The next one, as far as obstacle that we had identified going into this, was just the implementation of the technology. It's something new. It's something different. It requires an investment in both time and money. So how do we address the knowledge of the process? The very first thing we had to do was identify the things that we needed to do differently. We know how to do the business. We've been in this a long time. We've got this structure in place, this systematic management process that our organization uses. What do we have to do different to be successful in implementing Lean, Last Planner System, and BIM? We had to create new tools. It's very difficult to communicate what your objectives are or how you do something without having the tools in place, the forms, the processes, to make people who don't understand the system or are learning it to be successful. We had to utilize external expertise. This isn't something that Sundt was familiar with going into this other than having attended several seminars. So we identified that we needed to bring in someone who was an expert in this. We contracted with outside third party, wasn't Lean Project Consulting, which is kind of an outshoot of Lean Project Institute, to come in and do focused training for us. How do we address the need for training? Within our organization, we do what we call individual development planning. We have a very focused program for training individuals along their career path. We have added training for the Last Planner System, implementation of Lean, and this building information management to our individual development planning. We present academies within our company. We have academies for our project managers, we have academies for our superintendents, our engineers, our administrative staff. We created some very focused training programs for each of those sectors within our organization so that they know not only what to expect from these new processes, but what role they're going to play in helping to implement them in support of the rest of the project team. Additionally, we had internal and external focused seminars on the process itself, bringing in outside consultants to talk about what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. Dr. Ballard talked about when Sutter Health decided to implement Lean, they brought in 150 people from their subcontractor community and owners and made an announcement. And Sundt's done very much the same thing. We have a very big presence in our marketplace, and one of the ways that we're trying to lead that marketplace is to let everybody know what we think we can do better than everybody else. And implementation of Lean and implementation of the 3D 4D modeling is a way that we feel we can help lead our industry. The resistance within Sundt. The most important thing about Lean and the Last Planner System is that it is implemented by the last planners. It's the people actually doing the work that are the ones that play the biggest role in impacting the workflow. If those people aren't participating, then you're not going to be successful. We've got a lot of old dogs that we have to teach new tricks to. It's something that needs to be focused on. The next thing is the ability to identify and create champions. You need people to carry the banner, to lead the charge, to sell what you're doing, and to convince the people who are working out on the job that what we're doing is in the best interest of not just them, but the people that are supporting them. And for Sundt itself, for the shareholders, every single employee has a stake in the profitability of our company. We want to do things to help improve both our presence in the industry, our relationships with our subcontractors, and our ability to be profitable. You need champions to do that. If you can't identify champions and have people lead the charge, you're going to have a very difficult time implementing change and being successful. The perception of resistance from subcontractors. One of the things that's different, my background before I came on at Sundt, and I've been with Sundt going on 2 years now, is design, bid, build projects, hard bid contracting. In many cases, estimates are put together. There's no discussion of what the plan is before you go out and build a job. People take numbers, they put a pot together, and if they're a low bidder, they go out and build it. And then it's top-down management. It's direction. You're going to be on the job on this day, you're going to get this done in this time frame, and then this guy's going to come in behind you. Our approach to managing that was to solicit the input of our support community as we were putting together our proposal for the project that we're doing and all the work that we're doing in the future. We put together a milestone schedule before we put a price together, so we know what the plan is. This allows us to gain the initial commitment from the project participants. This is a big change in approach for construction. The next thing that we did to address this resistance from subcontractors, or at least our perception of what this resistance would be, was to have an initial kickoff meeting after we were awarded a project and bring in all the participants and say, this is the process that we're going to be using. We've addressed this to you in your invitations to bid. We've already told you that we're going to contractually obligate you to participate in this process. But you don't get buy-in by telling people what to do. You get buy-in by selling to other entities the benefits of participating in something that's different than what they're accustomed to doing. That was a big deal. It's something that's very important. After you sell them on how this process can benefit them, what Lean can do for them, what the BIM and the 3D modeling can do for them if they put the effort into participating, is to educate them, to teach them the processes that we are going to be using on the projects, and to demonstrate the tools to show them what the expectations are. One of the biggest problems in this industry, communication. Effective communication cannot work if you don't communicate to others what your expectations are. You can talk, and I can tell you, and you can listen, and you don't hear. Unless I ask you for a response, unless I solicit whether or not you understand what I'm trying to tell you, you will never understand my expectations, and you can't meet them. That's a big deal. Support from owners, architects, and engineers. One of the biggest obstacles that we perceive in that is the traditional separation of the responsibilities of these various entities. The contractor builds, the owner pays, the designer designs. Never the three shall meet. You won't be successful in this industry, in this marketplace today, unless you can figure out a way to bring those entities together. And one of the best ways that we found to do that is through the implementation of Lean in the last planner system and the use of 3D and 4D modeling. Bottom line, the last planner system and Lean construction is about getting the maximum value for the customer while eliminating waste. And you can't obtain maximum value unless you get commitment from all of the parties. We're in a fairly unique marketplace in Arizona. I know California is still struggling with the implementation of alternative delivery, and that creates a little bit of variability in who you're dealing with as your projects come up. In Arizona, in the year 2000, we implemented some statutory changes that allowed alternative delivery projects in a much broader sense. Construction manager risk, design build, job order contracting are very prevalent in the market today. They were not 5 years ago. One of the interesting things about that change is that if you don't do a good job, if you don't do a better job than the next guy, you don't get invited back. It's self-destructive unless you perform at a higher level than the people surrounding you. 80% of our work in our marketplace is with repeat clients. We think implementation of lean in the last planner system will help that to continue to grow. The contractual changes that are required. This is something that needs to be addressed on an individual basis depending on the projects that you're working on, and it's impacted by the project delivery system. If you're going to be doing design, bid, build projects, implementation of lean, if you want to see the true impact of that, has to start with the owners and the solicitation to bid. In our marketplace, solicitations from the owners, it's helpful to have that in there, but in a qualifications-based selection, we have the ability to control that from the contractor standpoint. It's important to keep that in mind. The invitation to bid documents that we use within our organization and the invitation to bid documents that come out from the owners, that's where this process should start. If you want to implement change, you need to start at the beginning. Because we do a lot of alternative delivery projects, our guaranteed maximum price proposals to the owners all stipulate in there that our projects are going to participate in lean and that we expect them to participate with us in the last planner system. It's important that we do that because there are changes in the expectations between the entities with the implementation of the last planner system. We'll touch on that in a little bit. Probably the most important one is, and I'm sure everybody in this room has seen it, you're awarded a contract, what's the very first thing you do? I heard this twice this morning in two of the other presentations. Put a plan together, and you turn it in, and you set a benchmark for the job. The most important thing to think about when you're implementing the last planner system is that that plan has to be realistic because it's going to be a tool that's used throughout the job to manage it. It's not a means of recording what you did and pointing finger and placing blame. With the last planner system, you plan at the most responsible moment, and that's when you have the best idea of what you're going to be doing at any given time. Our approach to planning with the last planner system on our projects is we have a milestone schedule that we complete with our bid documents. That milestone schedule is communicated out to the project participants. The very first thing we do when we're awarded the contract is we put a schedule together to plan the rest of the job. We won't put together a schedule, a completed schedule, till we're probably halfway through the project. The important thing to remember, though, is that in a project schedule and in the construction environment, it's very easy to get distracted by details that pull you away from the true impact of changes in the project. If you focus on the milestones that are far away and you focus on the details of the work that's under your feet, you're going to be more successful than if you have negative float showing up in your schedule that's the result of a scheduling error that took place because you tried to get a 3,000 activity schedule done in the first 30 days of a job when you're concentrating on buyout. It's a change. Challenges with technology and building information management, certainly investment in the infrastructure to make this happen, both in the hardware and the software and the training of the individuals to support that. Training on the new systems. And one of the key things here is not just training on the hardware and the software part of it, but training of the individuals who are going to be participating in this process so they understand the capabilities of the people who are going to be supporting them in this process. If my superintendents don't understand what they can get from the people who are doing the 3D model or the guys that are doing the pull planning sessions, then they can't utilize those tools appropriately to be effective. Training just doesn't mean hardware and software. It means having everybody in the team understand what the capabilities of the group are. Getting input from all parties. We'll touch on this later. The tools that you use are only as good as the effort that's used to create them. Getting input from everybody is key on that. Implementation of this technology changes also how we approach the relationship between the contractor and the engineer. We've had I don't want to say it's been a struggle, but it's been a challenge. Because we take a set of drawings that have been given to us by a designer now, and we create an integrated 3D model that has all of our civil and structural systems in it, we have the opportunity to put under the microscope in detail that's never been experienced by our project team before, the errors in the drawings at an early stage. And sometimes this can create tension. This can create an environment where people think they're being challenged over you did this wrong, or pointing the finger, because these things show up so glaringly when you're sitting in a room full of 30 people looking at clashes on a drawing. You got a pipe going through a footing, or a piece of ductwork that's conflicting with HVAC piping or fire protection piping. It points that stuff out in excruciating detail, and how you manage that is important so that you don't create an environment where it's adversarial. This is all about being successful and communicating to everyone what the objective is, and focusing on that is really important. As a part of this, we've developed a great number of tools for using this system, and I'm going to let Jeff introduce those tools and talk about how we've learned some things from them.
Can you hear me? Is it on? Can you hear me now?
Here.
For IS, I could switch. How's that?
I know this is good.
Switching, now you can hear me, right? Yeah. Okay, Andrew talked a little bit about who we are and how we came into this process of lean. I'm going to talk a little bit about the tools that we use, specifically on our job, and how we implemented it, and the lessons that we learned when we implemented these tools. I'll start off by talking a little bit specifically about what our project is. It is a $105 million project, like Andrew said. It's a 10 MGD sewage treatment plant for the city of Peoria, Arizona. It's actually 3 projects in one. That's where it becomes it's very complex, as Dr. Ballard said, that these jobs are getting over here to the left now. So it's a 24-month job. It is the actual on the plant site is a 40-acre footprint. It's a 10 MGD plant. And then off-site we have a pump station that pumps it, gathers all the sewage and pumps it to the plant. And in between there, the third phase of this is about 8.5 miles of pipeline that go between the pump station and a recharge basin from the plant. So it is a real complex job, and it's taken us a lot of work, but things are going well. Let me go through the tools and the lessons learned of implementing these tools. So starting off is the Milestone Schedule. And what we do here, I was kind of hoping that you would use a slide of should, can, will, did, because I was going to use it. I know, that's what I figured you were doing the lean. So this is the should, what you should be doing. It defines your expectations. From there, we put together the 3D 4D model, which again requires early collaboration so that we get things right the first time. After we get our milestone schedule together, we break that up into phases, and we start doing our pole planning sessions. We start bringing the subcontractors in. And that's where the actual meat of the planning happens of the project. That's where you're identifying the handoffs between the specific subcontractors. Once you get that information, you're putting it back into the P3 milestone schedule that you had. Our milestone schedule started off with about 180 activities. Now we're at about 2,300, and we're about halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through the pole plans. So that's where your schedule explodes. And it comes from these pole planning sessions. Once you get all that back into the P3 schedule, you can start pulling out sections of 6 weeks of that work as they're coming up. That is the 6-week look-ahead schedule. That is specifically for identifying constraints of what's going to stop that work from happening. You're looking 6 weeks out. You're looking at that 6 week and making sure that you can find anything that's going to stop that work from happening. By the time it gets to the first week, that work's ready to go. So once you get to that first week, that's where the planners, the last planners, are making the weekly work plan. This is where they're coordinating the commitments that they made in their pull plans, and that we've already pulled all the constraints off during the 6-week look ahead. This is what they're going to do. This is the I will. I'll do this next week. After that, it's the I did. The should, can, will, did is the I did. This is what I did. I told you what I was going to do last week. This is what I got done. You can't improve without measuring yourself. You have to have a way to measure yourself. Probably, I try to tell my guys it's not about what happened, it's about why it happened. So you have to track not only that they didn't get it done, but why something didn't happen. You can't improve, you can't get better if you keep making the same mistakes over and over. So it's about the 5 whys of why something happened, but why you didn't get something done. So let me start off with the milestone schedule. We were pretty lucky in our milestone schedule that we were able to do a lot of early collaboration because we were self-performing all the concrete work. So typically on a job of this size, the concrete kind of dictates the flow of the job. So we were able to do a lot of early collaboration with the concrete group. We took that information on how they were going to man load the schedule and how they were going to go around the job, and we looked at equipment deliveries and where they were coming into the picture. And we did some talking with who we knew that our subcontractors were going to be and how they were going to load the schedule. And that's how we built this milestone schedule. So what did we learn? The first thing you do after you do that milestone schedule is you break it into phases for planning. There's 2 different theories on that. Number 1, you can take a section of time and do the whole thing from, let's say you were playing January. But our job was so complex that if we planned that whole month, we would have probably 30 different subcontractors in there because they're working on the pipeline, they're working on the pump station. So we decided to break everything up into areas. Every specific building, we have like 7 buildings that are on the project in the plant site. And we broke them down into Mass X, structural concrete, and underground piping, and then we went from there and did masonry, structural steel. We really wanted to break it up. So that's how we broke that job up. What you got to be careful of is once you do that, there's obviously a flow of the job that you've created in that milestone schedule. When you put that information back, you need to make sure that you've kept that flow. So that's important. You need to schedule the planning sessions. Like Andrew says, the big thing about the job is we don't put out this giant detailed schedule in the beginning. But what we do put out is a schedule of how we're going to plan it. So we've done the milestone schedule. Now we send out our pull planning schedule. And it kind of needs to flow with how the job flow is going. So you can't just do all the work in the aeration basin all the way to the commissioning. You need to go as the job's flowing, do the structural concrete in the aeration basin, then the structural concrete. And we developed a plan for our pull planning sessions all the way through the job. The 3 and 4D model. As a superintendent, this is one of my first jobs that we use this, that I've used it. And this has been a lifesaver, believe me. Being able to look at clashes before they happen, being able to find out that you can't run this pipe a certain way before you've even ordered the pipe is proved to be invaluable. What are the lessons I've learned from it? It's only as good as the effort you put into it. Just like any other computer program, whatever it is, if you don't put all the information into it, that's all you're going to get out of it. It doesn't magically do something in the end and make it right. It's only as good as what you put into it. So what you need to do, you need to make sure you get the reviews and it's satisfying all the entities, be it the architect, the owner, and the engineer. The timeliness of the model. This is kind of a problem that we've had on our job. We need to make sure that as they're building the model, it's how our pull planning sessions are going. And she's building it in the same order that we're scheduling it, so that we have these models put together as we're doing the pull plans. We like to show them during the pull plan sessions. Another difficulty we found out with this is that just because of the way Sundt does things, they were going to supply us with a modeler on our job for the first 4 months, and then she was leaving. She was going to build this model and the 4D, and she was going to leave. Well, that doesn't work when you're doing pole planning sessions 7 months and you're still building the schedule. It's pretty tough to put the 4D together when she's not there anymore. So we identified that there's a problem with, we either need to have her there longer or we need to train people on our job site how to do that stuff. So it was just another thing that we learned. It requires frequent review. As changes happen, as they do with an RFI or whatever, if you don't get that information put in and make sure that it's right, that model isn't right. And if the model isn't right, you're building off something that's not correct. And what happens then, it's waste because you've done something and it's not right. Pole planning sessions. So once you've got your phase schedule, you've got all your phase planning, you scheduled how you're going to plan it, the next thing you're going to do is your pole planning sessions. This is probably the most important part of this process. This is where you get the meat of your schedule right here, is in this pole planning session. So what lessons did I learn? I learned a lot of lessons from pole plans. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Our first session, like I said, it was structural, it was mass X of an aeration basin. Then all the underground piping and all of the conduit. Then I decided we were going to also do all the slab on grades and all the walls and the decks. So after about 4 hours of doing this pole plan, we got through mass X and the slab on grade, and we just said, that's it. We need to stop. Because people they're not focusing on what they're doing. So we stopped and we regrouped and we brought everybody back, and I learned right from that very first one that you need to just do what you can do in that pole planning session and make sure everybody's focused. You need to have the right people there, and they need to be prepared at these pole planning sessions. As we did the first pole planning sessions, they were all on Mass X and concrete at all these different buildings. Sent over their head project manager of concrete, and he came in there, and we thought we were doing a great job. He was, Gary Terry probably knows more about concrete than I'll ever know in my lifetime. And he decided how he thought that all the sequencing of the pours were going to go. Well, lo and behold, when the job started, they sent out a superintendent who I found out later was actually probably smarter than Gary, because he decided that we're not going to be why would we sequence it that way? Why would we do these pours separate and not add these pours in when we do that? What we have to do, we had to replan. The main point here, though, is if they would have had Bill Duncan at the pole planning session, we wouldn't be replanning right now, because we'd be doing it how he thought we were going to do it. The next part of it is being prepared. It's very important that you understand not only the scope of what you're doing, but the scope of the work that you're doing. So one of the pole planning sessions was on the structural steel and masonry at the solids building, and it was very simple. It was structural steel, all the block work that goes around it, and the roof and the dry-in, and there was also a crane, an overhead crane that went in there. That was some of the great conversations that went on. It wouldn't have went on any typical job I've been on. The crane guy shows up to install this thing, and that's the first time he's ever seen the job. But they were able to do a lot of coordination between the structural steel guy and him about how they were going to install the crane rails and everything else. So once again, we thought we did a great job, and we were all patting each other on the back. And then about 2 weeks later, I'm going through a submittal on anchor bolts on the structural steel and how they tie into the masonry. And I thought to myself, how can we tie it into the masonry when we said we were going to put all the structural steel up and then we were going to put the masonry? What we have to do, we had to stop, bring everybody back in and replan that work. The mason had to go up so far and stop. Then the structural steel guy could come in. But again, my point here is I needed to be prepared. I needed to understand the scope of the work. And they need to understand the scope of the work. When they come in, they need to know what they're doing and how this stuff works before they can plan it. So that was important. This is an interesting one. Don't tolerate non-participation. At one of our early pole planning sessions, we had a subcontractor come in, and kind of like Andrew said, old dog, new tricks. He sat in the corner, and I could tell he was irritated about what was going on. So I went over there and I asked him, what I need you to do is put on these sticky note cards, I need to put the sequence of your work and the durations of each specific activity. He said, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure how I'm going to do this shit. Why am I here? This is a bowl session, not a pole session. So in not so many words, I asked him to gather his stuff up and just go. We don't want you here anymore. If you're not going to be part of the team and do this, then we'll find somebody else to do this. And off he went. So I know before he got, two things happened with this. One of them was before he got to his car in the parking lot, he called back to our main office and says, you know what's going on out here? Like they were telling a big secret on how we were doing something out there. And to my pleasant surprise, our office said, good, if you don't want to participate, we don't want you. See ya. The other thing that happened was all the other subs in the room, I couldn't have planned this any better. All the other subs in the room looked around at each other and say, you know what, they're serious about this. So I highly recommend if you do this, you can kind of plan this thing and have somebody come in and kick them out, and it really works kind of good. That's right. The bottom line is you need to have a plan for your planning. So you need to have the right people there. You need to make sure that they understand the work and they have a plan for doing your planning. And this is an example of one of our invitations to the pole plan. And as you can see, if I can get my thing, over here is who we invite. And what's interesting about that is, there's the owner, there's the architect and engineer. I've also invited subcontractors that aren't even part of this scope of work. So what we do is if they're coming up in some future pole plans, we bring them in early and say, hey, you need to come and see what we're doing. You need to learn how we're doing this. These three guys here are actually guys from another project in Sundt that we brought over so they can learn. So we're spreading the word. The next thing is a 6-week look ahead. So you've done the pole plan, you've entered that stuff back into the P3. Now the work's coming up. Now you're starting to look at the 6-week look ahead. You're looking at that work ahead so you can identify the constraints. What did I learn from this? It's about constraint removal, not about planning. Probably the first month of doing a 6-week look ahead meeting, we were going, okay, what are we doing next week? Yeah, that's right. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. Okay, and the week after that. And then as we got out towards the 6th week, it was just kind of general. And our consultant came in and said, you know what, you're doing this all wrong. You're supposed to be starting in the 6th week and really intensely scrutinizing that work and then going backwards. That's what the most important thing is you identify those constraints in the 6th week, and then by the time that work becomes next week's work, it's ready to go. It's all the constraints are off it, it's ready to go. So once you take that and you find a constraint, the important part of the constraint thing is, and what we developed on our job is a separate log for our constraints. So instead of just taking on the 6-week look ahead and having a little column, there's a column there that says constraint log, and there's a specific number. Then you can relate back to the constraint log and look at that log. And it identifies, I'll show you later, I have a constraint log, but it makes a responsible person for removing that constraint and what day they're going to do it. So one thing we learned from this, we were having some difficulty getting our owner and engineer to participate in this process. So as we were sitting in the meetings, and we might have an RFI that was causing work not to get done, or we might have needed a permit to start work on like the pump station, we weren't getting commitments from them on when to do it. So we were trying to think of how we could make them participate. So what we did was we brought the constraint log into the owners meeting and talked about PPC, because I also track how many constraints are removed on the PPC. That's one of our PPC items. Is we had 10 constraints last week and we removed 6 of them, so our PPC on constraint removal were 60%. So it creates peer pressure in there in the owners meeting, but also it makes them commit to something. If we say that we have an RFI and it's on the constraint log, and can one of you guys please tell me when this RFI will be back? And a lot of, their typical answer is, well, I'll call so-and-so. Okay, so the constraint now becomes that you will call so-and-so today, right? Yeah, I'll do it. Okay, I'll call so-and-so today. So, okay, the constraint is John will call so-and-so today on the RFI 65, and he'll let us know when it's coming in. And I'll put a promise date of today. So that's how you can use these tools to make other people participate. Let's put it that way. So don't get caught up in the semantics of it. It's a process. It's the should, can, will, did. So even though you look in the book and you open the textbook up and it says you put the constraint on the P3 6-week look ahead. We're using these tools of the 6-week look ahead spreadsheet. We've added this constraint log. It's about continuous improvement. It's a way that we use these tools on our job to improve. So you need to be concerned with the process, not the specific activities of what you're doing. So this is an example of our constraint log. You can see over here, this refers back to the P3 schedule, and it shows the specific schedule activities. This is a constraint description. This is the work that it impacts, what's going to happen. Specific people, who they are, of taking ownership of those constraints, the day it was identified, the day they promised to get it done, and the date that they actually got it done. And over here, there's a little plus delta, a little smiley face and a delta. If you get it done, you get a smiley face. If you don't, it's a delta. And then it's separated here by week, so I can track that, how many constraints were done. And over here is the variance codes of, the important things of why. And we actually worked on adding 3 more constraints for the constraint log. Unplanned work, resource unavailable, which is funny because right here was that one. This constraint was coordination of installation of a 48-inch pipe between 2 parties. Well, the guy was on vacation. So the resource was unavailable. That's why that constraint wasn't done. And then the one they like to use all the time, third-party commitments. I called so-and-so, and he didn't get back to me. So that's their generic answer to constraints on those. The next thing is, once you've looked at the 6-week look ahead, now you're working through, you're getting back to next week's work, and it's the weekly work plan. So this is an example of one of our weekly work plans, and I'm going to get more in detail about this. The lessons learned. We thought we were lean because now we've done these pull plans. We got a constraint log. We've done our 6 weeks look aheads. We're turning in work plans. We're logging PPC. And then I went out on the job site and I started talking to people and I started talking to workers. And I went up to Larry, the electrician, and I said, Larry, what are you guys doing today? Putting in conduit. What's your plan for the end of the week, Larry? I don't know. As far as I can get, I guess. I'm like, So then I went over to one of the carpenters and I said, Ramona, when are you guys pouring this wall? I don't know. I said, time out. So I called everybody back into the office and I said, you know what, we're all doing a great job with this, all us superintendents and everybody, but this information isn't getting down to the guys that are doing the work. So what did we do? We started posting these things all over the job site, all the weekly work plans. Every morning they have a safety meeting with all the crews, so we hand them out at the safety meeting. Now, probably the most important thing, except when I'm doing stuff like this, I go out in the field and I talk. You need to talk to the people and ask them questions. And they know that I do that every day. I'll walk out to any person on that job site and I can say, hey, what's your plan? Well, we're going to pour this wall on Tuesday, so I need to get this wall up. Now they understand that, and that was important. So, complete weekly work plans are essential. Another problem I had was getting them turned in. And not only getting them turned in, but making sure they were correct. So on Friday mornings when we were going to have the weekly work plan meetings, I would have to chase around the job site and call the electrician and say, where's your weekly work plan? I'd call, our concrete guy, where's your weekly work plan? So what would they do? They'd run in the office and they'd scribble something down and here it is. And I realized that wasn't working. So what did I do? I started turning in a weekly work plan with PPC. So now it becomes a peer pressure thing. When I can sit in the meeting and say, well, our PPC would have been 92% this week, but it was only 90% because so-and-so didn't turn in their weekly work plan on time. So it's amazing how peer pressure can foster participation. And this is actually the PPC of our weekly work plan turn-in. We had 1 week in January where one guy didn't turn one in. After that, it's been 100% right across the top. So just another way of using the tools that we have to do this system. More lessons learned. So now we're going along, and now we're really lean because everybody understands this crew over here, they know exactly what they're doing, and this crew over here, they know exactly what they're doing. Problem is, they didn't know what each other were doing. And I started getting examples of doing handoffs and the customer not being satisfied with what he was getting. And an example of that is our heavies group came out and they had to excavate a pad for concrete. So they did it. They came out on Friday and they excavated this big pad to subgrade. And then on Tuesday morning, the concrete superintendent calls me up. He goes, "This pad's 5 inches low. It's going to cost me, $5,000 to put 55 extra yards of concrete in here. You need to get them back out here to do that, to put AB in there." I said, "Well, did you check it on Friday? Did you relay to them what your expectations were?" He said, "How can you be putting this blame on me?" I said, it's both of your fault. You guys need to understand what the handoff is and what the expectations are to get that handoff, and you need to check it. That's the most important thing. So what we do now, called timeout again, called everybody back in. I said, "You know what? We need to make sure we understand what the handoffs are. We need to make sure we understand what the expectations are of the handoff." So what we do is, on their weekly work plans, they put on there not only who their customer is, but what the handoff is. And it became one of our QA, QC checklists. So this is an example of one of our early weekly work plans. As you can see, at the time, I thought it was a great job. He really did a nice job of talking about everything he was going to do, and he was putting down the pour times and when he was starting and when he would be complete. This is the same guy, what he does now. He puts on there, when he's done forming wall A7, Sundt Survey is going to take that from him. Over here, this was a huge one because they were having a lot of coordination problems between the rebar guy. So he would form inside walls. He would start it here, but on Thursday and Friday, JD Steel could go in there and start doing rebar. We identified what the handoffs were and who their customer was. Now we're lean. Now we're communicating. Percent plan complete. After you've done it, it's the did. It's what you did. So this is our PPC of our project. You see, we had a couple dips in December. We had some weather problems. Andrew likes to say whether or not they got it done or not. That's our weather variance code. But one thing I learned, and it's pretty interesting, and I found it to be true, is that some of my early institute goings on, you talked about how it's a 4-to-1 ratio. When one guy doesn't get something done, it actually typically affects 4 other people. Had an interesting thing happen. I forgot to put this in our presentation. Was our mason came out in our pole planning sessions, and you talked about culture and how it's hard to give up stuff. He had 30 days to do planning in his area. He had 30 days to do the masonry in the Solids Headworks building. He had 6 lifts to do. So basically he had 5 days for each lift. So when he came in there, he put down lift 1, 5 days, lift 2, 5 days, lift 3, 5 days, all the way through. And I asked him at the time, I'm like, won't you be faster in the beginning because you don't have any scaffold or anything? And he says, "Nope, this is what." I said, "Are you sure?" "Yeah, positive." So we look at the work, and we're coming along through the 6-week look ahead. He puts on his next weekly work plan. He's going to do lift 1, 5 days. When it got to Friday, he was on the 3rd lift grouting it. The next week, he completely finished all the way to the 6th lift and was grouted. So in 2 weeks, he's done 6 weeks worth of work. And I came to him and I said, "Joe, what are you doing?" And I said, "Why don't you tell me that in the beginning?" And he said, "Well, this is the first time I ever got yelled at for going too fast." And I said, "Well," and his exact comment to me was, "I'm not affecting anybody else. I said, well, what about the electrician that has to be with you while you're putting this block up? He had planned for you to be here 6 weeks. He was going to have one guy out here following you around. Now look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 electricians out here. You know, we have to build your penetrations. We have our concrete crew doing that. They're also building penetrations for walls. Had planned to have one guy doing that. While he was doing that, now I look over there, there's 3 carpenters building penetrations for you because you're going so fast. You affect other people. You need to be reliable. It can't be not predictable. That's the most important thing. So percent plan complete measures how much you said you were going to do, but the most important thing with percent plan complete, it reduces workflow variability, just what I was talking about. You want to be predictable. Peer pressure works. As you're sitting in those rooms talking about PPC, and they actually get pretty offended when their PPC is low. They like to point fingers. You'll find that out. And the scores don't tell the whole story. It's about why. And I try to tell them that. It's not about what happened. It's about why it happened. Lean is about continuous improvement. That's what, don't take it personally. That's what I tell them, because they can get pretty offended when their PPC gets low. There's a lot of peer pressure that goes on there. The variance chart, this is where you find out why. Lessons learned with this, you need to dig deep. An example of this would be our concrete crew didn't finish pouring a wall. So their typical answer usually is, it's prerequisite work, the iron worker didn't get done. And I said, really? Okay. So I turn to the iron worker and I say, well, how come you didn't get done? Well, I was going to put my rebar right here, but concrete crews stacked all their forms up, so I had to put my rebar 200 yards over there, and then we had to carry it in. So then I look at concrete, and they were sheepishly looking down, and I said, so I guess it would be scheduling coordination then would be the real reason why, right? So you need to dig deep, and by the 5 whys of problem solving, most of the time when you get to the 3rd why, but by the time you get to the 5 why, you really know why something happened. And that lets you address the real problems. It's easy to knock off the surface problems, but when you really dig deep and find out why things weren't going wrong, that's the important thing. Some other stuff we've been doing with our job is KAIZENs. We actually put out, I thought it was kind of corny in the beginning. I sent out improve our job, little thing, please fill it in. Within 3 days, I had 60 things stuffed into a box. And going through them, it was pretty interesting. There was a lot of them. We need more tools. We need this. We need that. We addressed every single one of them, and then had a job site meeting, and we talked about each one to make sure that they understood that we were looking at them. The most interesting one came from a carpenter, and he came out and said, "Can we give something back to the community?" So we're sitting in our staff meeting, and we're looking at each other. Why didn't we think of this? This is something that we're supposed to be doing, thinking of stuff like this. So we took all of our subcontractors. They actually participated, our painter, our pipeline guys. We had 60 people from our job site and their families go out, and we painted houses in the neighborhood. It was a great team-building exercise, and it was really valuable. So it's about continuous improvement, and requires everybody's participation. It's not just the guys sitting in the office. You need to get out in the field, and you need to talk to everybody. That's where you're going to get a lot of great stuff. So the community service project is that. Here's the newest thing I'm working on. What do you do if things aren't working? You're going along, the PPC is below 75% or it's below 80%. What do you do? Well, in the production world, they call it the OCAP, or the Out of Control Action Plan. And it's if a part is going down a production line and it gets out of spec, there's something that automatically happens. And something we're going to try and do is, if our PPC is going along and it drops below a certain point, something specifically happens. And we kind of we've been fooling around with it, and with our concrete crew, they dropped a little bit, and so what we did was we looked at why things dropped, and then we had a meeting, another scheduling meeting, because we looked at it was between them and the rebar guys. And on Thursdays now, we have a pre-meeting before the weekly work plan, or before they do their weekly work plans, to make sure they're getting their coordination together. And it brought the PPC back up. And I said, you guys can You don't have to do that meeting unless your PPC drops below this point, and if you does, then we're going to start having these meetings again. So it really became kind of an OCAP. So in summary, again, I just want to touch on some of these. Don't bite off more than you can chew when you're doing pull plans. Make sure you have the right people and that they're prepared at these planning sessions. Don't be afraid to replan, because if you're putting that information in there and it's not right, then you're not doing anybody any service. You can use peer pressure to foster participation, especially when you're doing PPC. Again, we thought we were lean. You can be going through the process and think you're doing the system. You need to check yourself. You need to go out and talk to people and make sure that they understand what the plan is and what the handoffs are and what their customers' expectations are. And again, that comes with having relevant information. That's, if it's not on the weekly work plan, you need to make sure it's on there. You can use these tools to make requests of entities who don't want to participate in the process. There's ways around doing it where you can almost force them into participating. Don't get caught up in the semantics of it. There's a specific process, a standardized system, but it's a process. And the tools that you create to use to make sure you do that process, that's what's important. Going through our superintendent academies, I've been presenting at those all over different divisions. I keep coming with a common theme, and during our Q&A at the end, they would say, hey, we're still having problems with subcontractors not finishing on time. And another guy would say, well, yeah, you know what? I noticed that too, that we're not getting submittals in on time, and we're still having late deliveries. We're doing lean. How come this is happening? And I tell them, this isn't a pill that you take and all your problems go away from the project. This is a way of managing the process and looking ahead to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes 2, 3, 4 times in a row. It's about continuous improvement. It's about accountability. And it's about measuring yourself to make sure that you get commitments done. It's about commitments. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Andrew. I guess I have to give him my thing back. Here you go.
All right. One of the things that we really took out of this as we move through this process, and I mentioned this earlier, is that you cannot be successful with this if you don't have champions. If you're going to institute change, you need people to lead the charge. And it's incumbent on all of us as we lead this industry to raise the banner, to teach, and to share the knowledge that we have. That's the responsibilities of these champions within our organization to develop the processes that will be implemented and to share that information, to teach it, and to share the lessons learned. One of the things that was taught to me early on in this business that a lot of people don't focus on enough, I think, is what's referred to as cultural storytelling. It's important to put things in context to the people who are the audience, to let them know how this has real meaning to them. Within our organization, these champions can take to other project teams stories about successes and failures, the failures probably being even more important with higher impact than the successes, about what we can do in our environment to be successful. You can't do that without champions. The bottom line, we are creating project leaders. We're not creating project observers. That can't be reinforced enough. Some of the characteristics you'll find of lean teams: intense collaboration. I've been doing this for 15 years. This is not a new business to me. What's important is I've recognized on this project is that we have more collaboration between all of the parties than I've ever experienced before, and it's had an impact. It's improved this job. Our project, I've been with Sundt under 2 years. There are 2 people on my job. It's a $105 million project that have been with the company more than a year. We are new together. We are new as a team. Think about that. I grab 6 people from this room and we go build a $100 million project together. How much do we know about each other? How much do we trust one another? How comfortable are we making commitments to each other and then following through with them? We've experienced that on this project. The next thing is to create planners, not schedulers. And there's a true difference there. People who plan understand the scope of what they're doing. And they understand the impacts of changes and delays and interruptions. Scheduling is just writing it down on paper. There's a big difference. You develop team ownership. People take true pride in what they do. It's been said many times in this industry that given the right tools and equipment and resources, everybody from the top to the bottom wants to go out and do the very best job that they can. But in order to do that, you need to get commitment from them to participate in the process. The ownership that comes from soliciting the input from all of the parties and then marching forward with the plan that we've created together creates the ownership that makes people stand behind their commitments. You'll find in lean teams you have more realistic schedules. Like I said before, this is no longer a tool to record what's happened and then place blame. Our schedule is a living document. We use it as a management tool to look forward in our job and plan what we're doing so that we can execute more efficiently. It's about continuous improvement, getting maximum value for the customer while eliminating waste. Does a lean address all the problems? Talk about this FMI survey that I referenced earlier, the things that have the biggest impacts on causing pain on a project. We'll look at the bottom 2 here, weak financial business acumen and general construction experience. These are technical skills. These are things that can be taught in textbook. The 2 top items, proactive planning and effective communication. These are arts. It's much more difficult to teach an art than a science. And that's because it requires your ability to see what you're doing and to get participation from everybody in a way that helps move the group forward. It's hard to describe. But what we found is that lean focuses on the 2 biggest things that are the hardest to teach. Getting planning done and communicating what the plan is. Effective communication relies on people understanding what the expectations are, or they're never going to help you to meet them. Lean does this. It's done it for us. In conclusion, this is all about developing leaders, people to take charge and to lead. We are working on inspiring a collaborative culture of planning within our organization, and Lean has helped us to do that. We focus now on the difference between planning and scheduling. We've created better managers as a result of that. And that we're challenging all partners to take ownership through commitment. Bottom line is, this is about change. This is change in our organization, it's change in our industry, and it's change in the marketplace that we're working in. This cannot be business as usual, or we are not going to succeed in it. What we're here to tell you is that our experience in implementing the last planner system, the 3 and 4D modeling, has been a change for us. But it's helped us, we believe, to become leaders in our marketplace. And we're happy to share this information because we think we can help everybody else move forward in the same fashion. I didn't have this in the presentation. One of the things that keyed off on what Dr. Ballard was talking about earlier with that graph of the pipe production. I've seen charts out there. Many of you have probably also seen them on the monumental changes that have taken place in the manufacturing industry in productivity over the last 50 years. If you see a very similar graph about the construction industry, one of the things you'll notice is that it's remarkably flat. That change hasn't taken place. We haven't followed the rest of the world in improving our business. And we've got to seek out ways to do that. Implementation of Lean in the last planner system, we found, in our experience, is a way that we can help improve that process and improve our productivity. Questions? Start up here.
I didn't see any data that suggests why it's better. There's a lot of words, and I liked it and appreciate it, but what's the improvement in the bottom line? Because based on your discussion, it sounds like you're getting more stuff done, but how do you prove that to people? Because basically people are going to want to know, why should I do this? What's the difference in my bottom line? Am I going to make more money? I'm going to get more stuff done? You know, because continuous improvement is based on data, right?
Yes.
There's no data in your presentation. So do you have data to prove that it's actually better?
Yes. One of the things that we have to keep in perspective here, Sundt's been involved in Lean for basically 2 years. We did one project as a test case, and we've implemented it across the board basically in the last 12 months. We track internally, that we use in some of our internal presentations, the cost of rework on our projects, and that has changed in the last year. It's changed in the last 2 years as a result of this, as the people who worked in our test case project have gone out into the other projects and have carried some of this philosophy with them. There is data to back it up. That data right now has been used internally, and I'm sure at some point it will be shared to some extent.
Well, thank you, Larry. That was my question, the quantification of the savings and the time.
Mm-hmm.
Can you send that out to the group, or can we get some of that data?
What I'm telling you is I'll go back to our management group and ask them if they want to share our financial data with everybody in the room. They may be a little reluctant to do that, but I'll tell you this much right now. The graphs that we showed at the beginning, our annual volume of the business group that we work in has changed 3 times in the last 3 years. We've gone from 150 million to 450 million. We've more than added 50% to our staffing. This has been a huge cultural change for Sundt. We're still profitable. We're making more money now than we've made in the past. We also track our rework. The rework has decreased. You can't do that unless you're doing something right. 5 more years of data and we'll be able to prove this without any question. Right now it's still in transition.
I can share some data from other companies and projects later on.
Anybody else?
Okay, it seems that you have a very big cultural change going on in your company, but what do you think, in which point you are in this changing process at the moment? Is there 50% from the work done, or is it still left about 10%? Or what is your estimation about that?
What is our estimation of how we're moving in the process?
In which point of your changing, in this cultural change in work,
Mm-hmm.
you are at the moment? You are done
The cultural change is not over in Sundt. You know, our business group has 1,600 employees. Our company has 3,000 employees. Implementing this process across the board as project teams evolve through our acquisition of work, going out and building and implementing this, that turnover doesn't take place in a year. It's still evolving. We're probably 50% complete with that right now. The remarkable thing is that we've seen an impact even at this point in the evolution of that change.
I wanted to ask if the projects were completed on time and within budget.
The test case project that we did, the Apollo River Point, was completed on time, and it was completed on budget. Our project right now is a 24-month project, and we're 10 months into it right now. We are on time. We are marginally on budget. But we're only halfway done. We've got a long way to go. And in looking back over the last 10 months of working on this project, 6 months ago we were 6 weeks behind schedule. A month ago we were 3 weeks behind schedule. Implementing this process has helped, and it's moved our project forward in a very positive fashion.
I would actually hate to think where we would be right now had we not been doing this process. With all of the planning and coordination and stuff that we've been doing, I'd hate to think where we would be right now if we didn't have this.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you something, probably don't, my company doesn't want me talking about this probably, but this has been a very effective process for us on our project. We have had some financial difficulties from funding our project from the owner's perspective. We've had a lot of changes that the owner has made to our job that have impacted their ability to budget through the end of the job. Because of how well this project is going, we are doing a CM at risk or alternative delivery project. We've got a contractor's contingency on the job to accommodate bumps in the road and errors and problems. We've given the owner back some of that money without having been asked to do it because we are comfortable that we're going to meet our budget. How many contractors are going to do that? We just gave back some of our risk, or took back some of our risk. That's a big deal.
What about the software tools you are using? Are they tailor-made for you, or can I just go on?
No, we're using marketable systems. Our structural work is done in a system made by Autodesk called Revit, and all of our mechanical systems are done with Navisworks.
So what's scheduling program?
Scheduling is Primavera Project Planner.
Can you describe the term 4D and how that's used in your planning and implementation process?
Well, 3D is XYZ. 4D adds time to the dimension. Our 3D model is built in the detail of how we're constructing the project. When you see a 3D model of our job, I've actually got one I can show you guys if you were interested in seeing it. But it shows, the structural coming up out of the ground in full glory. But the way it's built is actually every concrete pour is a part of that model. Installation of the pipe is shown as part of the model. The activities associated with those work items are tied to our P3 schedule so that we can visually assess if we're going to be changing a sequence of work in the schedule, how it's going to affect the construction. One of the things that we didn't really talk about is how much we use this 3D model to communicate what the plan is. For instance, if anybody here has built a wastewater plant, our headworks facility is a very complicated concrete structure, very complicated. Conveying that information to craftspeople is sometimes very, very difficult when you've got overlapping, interlocking slabs and small structures that build one upon another. We've actually brought our concrete crews into the office, sat down with the model, and then stepped through pour by pour what the sequence of the work is and how, if we don't get one thing done, it impacts something else down the line. Taking the model to the fourth dimension and showing the sequence of how that work goes together visually conveys information to set the level of expectations that we have for each other. It's a big step.
Have you been planning to implement the 50 costs?
Yes, that is in the plan. It has not been implemented. We're still working on the technical challenges of doing that. Outside of the project that we're doing, we are implementing the 3 and 4D on our, it encompasses our civil work, all of our underground piping, all of our electrical duct banks, all of our structural concrete work, all of our structural steel, and all of the shell structures up to dry end of the roof. We haven't gotten to the interior part of the building yet. However, we are building a new corporate headquarters building. And I can tell you that because of the initiatives that we've taken at Sundt, we are taking that to the next level. We are doing that as a design-build project where we are the design builder and we've contracted with all of the entities to help support that. We are requiring the architect, the mechanical system designer, the structural engineer. Everyone designs the entire project in 3D from the ground up. And we are incorporating those models into one master model that we're managing, And then we're tying the cost of those building components into the fifth dimension so that we can experiment with how we're going to use this to improve our ability to build jobs in the future. So we are doing that. We're doing it in a very limited sense because we're still trying to learn how to do it.
One of the things as you go through the technology that you're starting to use and the project management capabilities and the processes that you're improving, what are you guys doing then to look kind of upstream to your subs, or even upstream further to, I mean, some of the people in the room, the Trimbles and the Caterpillars and the suppliers of some of the tools, I guess what would you push upon them or ask them to, what have you learned to request that we get more efficient to help you, again, get even more efficiency out of it, whether it's information or technology or...
One of the things that we've experienced as we go through this is that we get a lot of people that come in wide-eyed when they start seeing the tools that we're using, that they've not experienced that kind of environment before. They see things that they've had no experience with. And as that happens, they start throwing out all these ideas, well, if we could do this, we could be more efficient. And it's that process that's helped us to figure out what we want to ask the manufacturers and the suppliers of this equipment, the right questions to help us succeed in filling these needs that we have evolving in front of us. Any other questions?
Does fabrication utilize your model? So I mean that when you need concrete to the building site, so do they not know on the factory that when is the right time to bring those stuff?
We use the 4D model right now mostly to convey schedule information and expectations to our field crews. As far as I see an opportunity to have that published on a website, for instance, where our concrete supplier can look at that and see. He can click on a concrete pour as it's coming up the next week, and it'll show, you know, how many cubic yards of concrete he has to have and when we're expecting to pour it. We're not at that point yet. I see the opportunity to do that. There's real value in being able to use the tools that we're creating to communicate that information and set the expectations. It's not there yet.
One thing we're doing with that, though, is allocation of manpower. We do, our schedule gets put into a master thing, so if we're making a concrete pour, they are allocating finishers from our concrete division to be on our job site.
Mm-hmm.
So that, it's happening manpower-wise, but as far as getting outside of our company, it's not.
Yeah. This is really new to us, and it's kind of cutting edge, if you will. The use of this technology is evolving, and the more we use it, the more opportunity we find to benefit from it. Any other questions? Yeah.
Are you using some kind of document management tool?
We are using Prolog to do document management on our project. That's something that's used across all of Sundt. Yes.
So how much pull do you have to go back to the owners and developers in getting proper information to you from the engineers? Because, you know, I saw that you're doing a lot of the 3D modeling.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're doing that yourself. So
yes.
How much is actually supplied or could be supplied from the engineers? And if they're not giving it to, how much pull can you go back on the owners, the architects, and say, hey, listen, we're not getting what we need. This is what we need to be more efficient.
One of the most interesting things that I've experienced on this job is that as we go through these model reviews, the designer on our project is Black & Veatch, an institutional firm across the world in engineering. And their designers have sat in our meeting and said, why didn't we do this?
Exactly.
And it's resonating. I mean, it's going out.
Take one more. We're a little bit behind schedule. So
Okay.
give the other speakers a chance. One more question or comment? I didn't mean to stop you. Right, yeah.
Well, let me just throw in one more thing since you don't have a question. We won't do this because we don't have time, but one of the things that we do as we implement this lean system and the continuous improvement is we end every meeting that we do with what we call a plus delta session. One of the things that's important is that as you're going through continuous improvement, the processes that you're using have to be measurable so you can determine whether or not you're being effective and you can look for areas to improve. We won't do it here because we're short on time. What I'd like to ask you guys to do is walk away. When you finish your meetings, ask what did you do right and what did you do wrong, and get feedback. When you start your next meeting, that's the first agenda item on your meeting. It's about continuous improvement.